Well, I will start with this presentation. And do you hear me? Okay. And the title is Physics, Geobiology, and Radiesthesia. And I am working with the active participation of the docer Pierre Nicolas. The first presentation of part of this talk was done at the symposium organized by my friend Jean-Claude Junel in Paris last December. So this is a second presentation of these results. We went to near Avebury last July in 2008. And we visited six crop circles, and we have used three different approaches. First of all, I have made some physical measurements, and then in parallel, I have searched for the Hartmann grid. The people who knows geobiology knows what it is. And also water currents using geobiology, searching for vortexes and dimensional levels using that time dowsing. And back home, we have made a dowsing on photographies by my friend Pierre Nicolas. Here are an example of the six crop circles we visited, and I name according to the location where they have been found. So the Sanctuary, Eastfield, East Kennet, Horton, Old Cannings, and Westwood. Here is a summary of the physical tools that I have used. I excuse for these technical informations. I have measured magnetic field and electric field, alternate currents, in this energy range and frequency range, sorry. 15 Hertz up to 5 kilohertz for the magnetic field, and 10 Hertz up to 100 kilohertz. And I have many devices to measure magnetic field and electric field. This is a first one here. This is another one here, which permits to measure microwaves. And another set here, which allows me to know the electromagnetic smog in some parts of the system. And then in this region here, I have displayed the tools used by a geobiologist. And I have mainly used this one, which is a kind of antenna able to rotate around an axis. And I have used this one also, which is well known to measure Hartmann grid, vein water, to search for cavities and dimensions. Now my question was, is there any manifestation of the Hartmann grid in a crop circle? That was my starting point. And why not? What are the arguments? Geobiologists tell us that in some monuments or churches, this Hartmann grid disappears due to the geometric structure of the church. And the invisible walls of this Hartmann grid are pushed outside of the structure. But we know for sure that crop circles are made of a splendid geometry. Everybody agrees about that. Therefore, I have speculated that some effect could arrive if we inspect inside a crop circle. And then I came to England. Let me recall some properties of the Hartmann grid. At the Earth's surface, it's a kind of rectangular grid, 2 meters by 2.5 meters at our latitude, and the thickness of the walls, invisible walls, is about 21 centimeters. But when we go to the equator, the grid is the grid is enlarged, and we have a mesh which has 8 meters by 9 meters at the equator. But now, when we go to the pole, to the magnetic pole, we found that the grid is extremely narrow, 0.8 by 0.8 meter. So we begin to understand that there is possibly a link with the magnetic field of the Earth. And we have also shown that this grid is very sensitive to solar eclipses. And we see then that the wall thickness grows drastically up to practically disappearance of the mesh. We have a uniform radiation at some place of the Earth under the eclipse, at the maximum of the eclipse. So we see that this energy is responding very strongly to the influence of the movement of the planets and so on. But even more, on the Martian surface, we have found a similar grid, more huge, 300 meters by 450 meters, with a thickness of the walls about 60 or 65 centimeters. So we begin to understand that that could be something which is already in the nature, including all the planets. Okay, so this information comes from the northern region of Mars. Now, before my trip to Wiltshire, a first investigation had been realized on a picture of a crop circle by our friend, the doctor Pierre Nicolas, and I have been informed about his results. So I knew exactly what he found. This picture was taken from Nexus, which is a kind of journal, I don't know how to translate in English. And it was published in 2007. And this picture was taken at Clatford in Wiltshire. Using a pendulum in his right hand and a pencil in his left hand, moving on the map, asking specific questions, he has obtained absolutely astonishing answers. Here is the first presentation of this crop circle. And here, I hope you can follow my, yes, it works. Here are plotted the grid of the Hartmann grid, and what it is called that the grid stopped at the outmost edge of the crop circle. So I have lost my here. So it means that during along these lines here, the Hartmann grid stops completely. No Hartmann grid inside this crop circle at the first glance. Secondly, he found 3 filaments of underground water, and each crossing coincides with the center of small eccentric circle. So if you want to follow, the first is here, first current, and going down, another one here, circling there, and leaving at that point. And so if you are clever enough, you can see that these currents are crossing at the center of a small circle 7 times. And all these centers are themselves sat on the biggest circle. So there is not at all, no hazard, no random process. Then he discovered, by asking the question, are there any cavities inside? That 2 cavities were found. We will later come on this point. At each crossing of currents, he found a cosmotelluric chimney. So, what is a chimney for the geobiologist? This is a kind of column of energy impinging upon the Earth, and which has a polarity. It means that it changed the circulation of the pendulum by using some frequency. And in the very center, there is also a vortex-type column of energy. This energy is spiraling. The first cavity now, the edge of this cavity is shown by the end of the black arrow here. So the first cavity is there underground. The depth is between 16 and 20 meters, and the dimensional level is the third one, our dimensional level, and then a column of energy in the center. The second cavity is more great and more deep. The circular edge of this cavity is materialized by 6 additional tiny circles equally seated. These green arrows here, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. When you follow the end of this arrow, you observe some plotted circle by hand, and this new circle just cross the tiny circle which is here. 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, and another 1. And the depth is between 32 meters and 36 meters underground. And when we ask for the dimension, he obtained the following answer: fifth dimension. And when asking who made such cavity, he obtained the answer: it was an UFO. This is what he said. First of all, I had no idea of the significance of these external microcircles. But when plotting the edges of the second cavity, I realized that they were sat exactly on them. So no hazard, no random process. Then we agreed on the following strategy. On the field by myself, using geobiology and radiesthesia, with additional physical measurements, I have searched for man-grid underground water currents, cavities, dimensional level, and this during the very short time of the visit. It means that I had a really very poor time to make all this research. And at home, later on, by the well-recognized author Pierre Nicolas, working on maps and images of crop circles, and in the total ignorance of any kind of results, he searched for the same informations. Let's go to the first picture of the sanctuary. These observations are made by myself. I have found a central vortex in here, where the red arrow showing the center here. And in the second circle, detached circle here, I have found that it was a water current underground. Now, my friend Jean-Claude Jonel asked two questions. What kind of energy could it be? Cosmic one? My pendulum said yes. Etheric one? My pendulum said yes. After that, I have not asked for the dimensional level of this picture because I was involved in the physical measurements. But what we saw is no observed significant signals on my physical measurements. Absolutely nothing. They were working perfectly, battery was okay, but no signal coming from all the instruments I've used. So they are not physical, apparently. Or maybe my instruments are limited in frequency range and sensitivity, and then maybe the answer is outside these limits. I don't know. Now, what my friend has found. In this area, H area, including the two great circles, he said there is no Hartmann grid inside this area. He found that there was a geological fault close to the main axis of the circle, of the crop circle. He found also three water currents at different depths and coming down. The first one is between 7 meters, 11 meters underground. The second one practically at the same level, but if you are clever enough, you can see that the first one, which is here, and the second one, which is here, they never cross. The crossing comes from the third one, which is between the 31 meter and 37 meter, more deep, and it crosses the two previous currents. And what we observe is each crossing of the currents is also the center of a small circle in the design of the crop circle, and this for 4 times, suggesting a systematic behavior. At each crossing of the currents, a cosmotelluric chimney is found, and therefore a question arises. Could it be that the circle makers had used intentionally the specific telluric energies associated with the crossing of the water currents to anchor their geometric pattern in our third physical dimension? Then he found also 2 cavities. The first one is shown by the end of the red arrow, so it coincides perfectly with the big central circle. And cavity number 2 can be followed here by the dashed line. So this cavity is more huge than the first one. If we look at the characteristics of this cavity, the depth of the first one is between 8 and 15 meters, and it belongs to our third dimension, and there is nobody inside. In the second cavity, here the depth is more great, between 28 meter and 37 meter. The dimensional level is the 5th, and we have obtained the information extraterrestrial beings are inside. And finally, we found a column of energy like a laser beam at the very center with a very high vibratory level. Then my friend asked the question, what is the origin of these intelligences or people inside the second cavity? He obtained the answer, extraterrestrial. They come from the solar system, and more specifically from Japet, which is a satellite around Saturn. And following the other questions, he obtained the information that the pattern would not be addressed to us, but to point out their presence to other extraterrestrial intelligences. They use the Earth as a post office. And apparently, they don't look for a communication with us. The designers do not look for obtaining therapeutic or spiritual effects. However, this can influence our physical body due to the very high vibratory level of the pillar of energy here. So some people could feel diseases, nausea, and so on, due to this high energy here in the center. And he obtained the information on the pattern, and the central column of energy have the same origin. Image and cavities are made by a UFO, according to him, and the water currents were already there. It means that these intelligences know perfectly well the distribution of the currents inside of the Earth, and they use it systematically. Now, we move to the second second crop circle. What I have found, a cavity in the center here, belonging to our third dimension, and this diameter here is about 15 meters. I have asked for the first time of my life the question, what the dimensional level of this structure, and to my deep astonishment, I have obtained the information 16th dimension. I have found that there is a vortex type column of energy in the center, and inside the ellipse I have found that the water was inside underground, but I had no time enough to follow the contours of this water current. And I have asked the question, is there any Hartmann grid? I obtained the information, yes, could be. Now, what my friend has found. Sorry. In the hatch area, which is here, including the great circle and the ellipse, he said there is no Hartmann grid in this area. There is no geological fault. He found two water currents which cross under the center of the ellipse. The first one is here and leaving to the left, and the second one, the green line, is here, crossing the first at that point, at the center of the ellipse, and moving outside of the crop. The first current is at between 6.5 and 7.5 meter, and the second one more deep at between 11 meter and 13.5 meter. And here again, the specific energy associated with the crossing of the currents and the chimney seem to have been used by the authors. So the same process always arriving all the time. There are two vortex types columns of energy. The first one is here in the center of the big circle, and the second one is here with a chimney associated. Now he asks the question, how many cavities are inside? So in the great circle he found two cavities. The first one is shown by the end of the green arrow here. This is a big circle. And the second one is shown by the end of the blue arrow, and this is the central disk. Exactly. Asking the question what dimensional level he obtained, a third dimension, and nobody is inside this cavity. Now, cavity number 2, more deep, between 26 and 34 meters. Dimensional level 5th, and he found that extraterrestrial people were inside. Asking the origin, he obtained the answer solar system, Oberon, satellite of Uranus. Then he continued his investigation, and in the great ellipse, again he found three cavities there. The first one is limited by the end of the ellipse, the second one by the end of the green arrow here, and the third one coincide with the central disk inside the ellipse. So for cavity 1, these are the dimensions, the depth he found, third dimension, and nobody inside. He said it's full of water. In cavity number 2, more deep, between 20 and 27 meters, he found that the dimensional level was 5th, but nobody inside. And for cavity number 3, the more deep, between 38 and 48 meters, he obtained a 6th dimension, and that extraterrestrial people were living there. And there is one column of energy at the center, the very center here. The origin is out of the solar system, and it comes from the south of the star Alkaid, which belongs to the Great Bear. Then he has observed a kind of telluric line, or what he called a line of energy, running through the two centers. It is between these two yellow lines here. Not underground, but extending from the surface up to 100 meters high. He said that this is not a ley line. There is no frequency attached to this telluric line. It is not of electromagnetic type. It is not found into the human body. He called this two-dimensional. He said this is a kind of energy not yet discovered. And the image and the cavities, he said, are made by two different UFOs, and the water was already there prior to the arrival of this crop circle. Now we move to another one. What I have observed here, I have found two parallel water currents. They are shown by the red arrows, which are here. I have found that there is no Hartmann grid inside. Concerning the dimensional level, I obtained the answer 7th, and I have found a vortex in the central point. Another one, all cannings. I have found that there is a geological fault, which is mentioned here by this red line. I have found that water current was here. I have found that the Hartmann grid was there inside and outside. I have found a cavity in the central point, short dimensions, 3 meters. And when I asked the question, what dimensional level could it be, I have obtained 12th. Alors, my friend was in trouble with this picture. He found nothing. He was totally unable to obtain an answer. But we have another kind of information coming from my friend Jean-Claude Jonel, which is a channeler. And he told us that it is a living vessel, living being, able to expand or to contract, or to get a spherical form. It is hollow inside, and it is to be seen as a representative of a volume in space. And he confirmed that the dimensional level was 12th. And he said that the geological fault and the water allowed the picture to be revealed like a film of camera. So these ingredients here appear to be extremely important, the water. Now another one, Westwoods. This is what I have observed. No electromagnetic signals catched by our used physical instruments. Again, my instruments were very silent. Absolutely nothing. In the central circular area, the diameter of which is about 10 meters, I have found underground water along these two axes, mentioned here by the dashed red lines, one here and one other here. I have found a cavity belonging to the 7th dimension, and a central vortex also is present. I have found a geological fault here, mentioned by the blue line. And in the arms here I have found the Hartmann grid, but I don't remember if I have a question for the Hartmann grid in the central part. I don't remember. Now, my friend has observed that there are two underground currents crossing themselves many times and apparently made with an intention. At each crossing is observed the presence of a cosmotelluric chimney 16 times at the center of a small circular area. This area here, circular area 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc., 16 in time. And this cosmotelluric chimney exists in the central point, whose polarity is reversed periodically. And this would come from a terrestrial civilization living in another space-time than ours. Here is the current. It is difficult to follow each current, but if you are clever enough, you can see that the current number 1, he starts from here, making a circle, then continuing that way, that way, that way, that way, making another circle, coming there, 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 again circling, and it continues in some part here, and again, and again. And the second one, number 2, which is plotted using the green color, is continuously coming down, starting from 6.5 meter up to 39 meter. And what is exceptional is that the design of the picture is such as each crossing is used. That's incredible. Absolutely all the crossing of the currents, we found a circle on it. Now, some useful informations. In a paper written in this Sacré Planète, which is a journal, this man, Glenn Brufton, has talked about the importance of the water in the formation of the crop circles. He says that 71% of the crop circles in the United Kingdom are formed on the chalk or on the green sand, something with a mixture of chalk and other things. So it seems that the combination of underground water and currents of energy attract or allow for the formation of crop circles. Now some information about the context. We know that the pure water cannot transport electric current, but the more you have dissolved particles, the more the water becomes conductor. We know also that the water which is inside the main aquifer areas in England are charged in minerals, so it becomes highly conducing, yes, for the electric currents. And in the same way as the electric current, the electromagnetic energy comes towards the best conductor. So the crests, the shock crests, attract the powerful energetic currents. In addition, the chalk is alkaline and saturated in water. So below the chalk is argile, which contains silex, a mixture of silicium and quartz. And this mixture is acid. So this association attracts the powerful currents, and they charge electrically the zone. So in such a context, the circle makers can apply their program. The context is good for them. Other informations. One of the characteristics of the water, we know that when the water is passing through channels which at some time becomes very narrow, then you produce some vortexes. And attached to this vortex of water are also attached energy vortex. And then we are very close to what Victor Schauberger did in Austria before the Second World War. And also we know that the work of Benveniste has shown that we can put an energetic print inside the water by applying an electric current inside. Now I have searched for other information similar to ours, and I found that in this Nexus journal, this man, Stefano Cardino, which is an architect and a geobiologist in Switzerland, said, in the crop circles, I observed that there are cosmotelluric chimneys centered on the circles, and whose the diameter correspond to those of the circle. He said also, at the center of a crop circle, there is many times a vortex or a spiral of energy. And we know that in England, some vortexes linked sometimes the crop circles to some sacred buildings built by humans. And these perhaps could explain why certain crop circles are arriving each year at the same place. But this is his idea, of course. All this information are questionable. At vertical of the center, he says that some forms, some Platonicians polyhedra, I don't know how to translate this in English, some geometrical, yeah, Platonic polyhedras, yes, which are rotating over themselves. He says they are Merkabahs with entities inside. And these Merkabahs push the Hartmann grid outside of the crop. So, again, the same information than us. One of the characteristics of the crop circles is the absence of the Hartmann grid inside the formations. So we confirm, partly we confirm this statement. And he said also the nausea are due to the big energy which is inside the vortex. So this can explain the nausea about for some persons which are sensitive. So he gives his believing. For me, the crop circle as related with Gaia, the conscience of the earth, in relation with the sacred geometry and the cosmotelluric energies. I think that the balls of light that some people have seen are coming from the elementals. These pictures, whatever the author is, allow the earth to re-equilibrate herself. And okay, and this is for enlarge our conscience. And some channelings also say that these are messages for the humanity, some kind of advertisement which come from some way of thinking which are coming from a different level of conscience. Yes, but I practically finished. If you can translate the last one in Greek.
Okay, he just asked me to help him before to translate in English because it's quite difficult for him. Basically, many channelers say that the communication is explained that these are communication and messages for humanity, warnings coming from the processes from higher levels of consciousness. These are warnings that are coming, and warnings and communicating. In other words, the messages are coming from a higher level of consciousness. And if you refer to the neurophysical researchers, that indicates there is an activation of the cervix of the right part of the brain. And I've noticed that summer, actually. I've had a lot of problem with this summer. After the visit of a crop circle, you can also imagine that there is a motivation that is more spiritually inclined. In other words, it's trying to enhance our ability to be more on the right side of the brain. And an invitation to transform oneself, to evolve in our way of thinking that is coming from beings outside our realm or from other dimensions than our own.
Thank you, Francine.
Pas si mal, eh?
Bien, bien.
Who says science is boring? This is amazing, isn't it? Qui dit que la science est ennuyante, hein? C'est merveilleux, n'est-ce pas?
Mais attendez, ne partez pas, il y a tout ça.
C'est pas fini?
Non, non, pas tout à fait.
Okay. Okay. Well, in Nexus number 41, 2005, page 25, crop circles, the hypotheses of sound, on sonar sound waves. That's it. According to Isabel Kingston, the information was transmitted in 1982. Would come from l'éveil, the watchers, those who are awake. A group of consciousness, collective consciousness, universal collective consciousness that have been noted throughout history to help guide humanity during period of difficulty. Bouleversement is great changes and difficulty, changing of direction. They appear in the Egyptian texts under the name of brilliant, or Els, shining, the shining. In other words, they seem to emit light, and they were called El. El was connected with that. They also help oh, I see. So she says that they were also instrumental in the construction of Silbury Hill here near in the Avebury complex, il expliquait que so they explain that they explain that the principal aim of these design is to feed the information into the energetic. I'm just as bad as he is, actually. It's very difficult to do this ad lib now. To impart information in the grid of energy that is the subtle grid of energy of the planet in order to help humanity to take conscience, to realize its responsibility in its position of co-creator of our reality, really, and to develop our potential. Our potential of that we have a higher potential than we use, and that's what she said, to help us develop our potential. There we are. I think that's quite accurate. Voilà. Et les Français, vous pouvez le lire vous-même.
Thank you very much, Francine.
Merci.
For your kind help.
Can I just add one more thing that was not mentioned? Is that what was mentioned briefly by Sam? Is that I'm very, very interested in what Jean-Paul does, because all the research that were done on the physical aspect of crop circles by Dr. William Levengood, a biophysicist from America, he says that plasma is always found. There are always traces of the effect on the plant shows the involvement of plasma. And I was fascinated that Jean-Paul was a professor of that kind of science, and that he worked with plasma for many, many years, and he taught about these forces. And he just told me before he started his presentation that plasma behaves like a living being. It's not just mechanical. And the involvement of plasma and crop circle, I find that absolutely amazing. Thank you for telling us that anyway. Thanks.
This is the end of my talk, and thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you, Jean-Paul. Okay, it's...
this grid is very sensitive to solar eclipses. And we see then that the wall thickness grows drastically up to practically disappearance of the mesh. We have a uniform radiation at some place of the Earth under the eclipse, at the maximum of the eclipse. So we see that this energy is responding very strongly to the influence of the movement of the planets and so on. But even more, on the Martian surface, we have found a similar grid, more huge, 300 meters by 450 meters, with a thickness of the walls about 60 or 65 centimeters. So we begin to understand that that could be something which is already in the nature, including all the planets. Okay, so this information comes from the northern region of Mars. Now, before my trip to Wiltshire, a first investigation well, I will start with this presentation. And do you hear me? Okay. And the title is Physics, Geobiology, and Radiesthesia. And I am working with the active participation of the doser Pierre Nicolas. The first presentation of part of this talk was done at the symposium organized by my friend Jean-Claude Genel in Paris last December. So this is a second presentation of these results. We went to near Avebury last July in 2008, and we visited six crop circles, and we have used 3 different approaches. First of all, I have made some physical measurements, and then in parallel I have searched for the Hartmann grid. The people who knows geobiology knows what it is, and also water currents using geobiology, searching for vortexes and dimensional of the structure. But we know for sure that crop circles are made of a splendid geometry. Everybody agrees about that. Therefore, I have speculated that some effect could arrive if we inspect inside a crop circle. And then I came to England. Let me recall some properties of the Hartmann grid. At the Earth's surface, it's a kind of rectangular grid, 2 meters by 2.5 meters at our latitude, and the thickness of the walls, invisible walls, is about 21 centimeters. But when we go to the equator, the grid is the grid is enlarged, and we have a mesh which has 8 meters by 9 meters at the equator. But now, when we go to the pole, to the magnetic pole, we found that the grid is extremely narrow, 0.8 by 0.8 meter. So we begin to understand that there is possibly a link with the magnetic field of the Earth. And we have also shown that these allows me to know the electromagnetic smog in some parts of the system. And then in this region here, I have displayed the tools used by a geobiologist. And I have mainly used this one, which is a kind of antenna, able to rotate around an axis. And I have used this one also, which is well known to measure Hartmann grid, vein water, to search for cavities and dimensions. Now my question was, is there any manifestation of the Hartmann grid in a crop circle? That was my starting point. And why not? What are the arguments? Geobiologists tell us that in some monuments or churches, this Hartmann grid disappears due to the geometric structure of the church. And the invisible walls of this Hartmann grid are pushed outside levels using that time dowsing. And back home, we have made a dowsing on photographies by my friend Pierre Nicolas. Here are an example of the 6 crop circles we visited, and I name according to the location where they have been found. So the Sanctuary, Eastfield, East Kennet, Horton, Old Cannings, and Westwood. Here is a summary of the physical tools that I have used. I excuse for this technical informations. I have measured magnetic field and electric field, alternate currents, in this energy range and frequency range, sorry. 15 Hertz up to 5 kilohertz for the magnetic field, and 10 Hertz up to 100 kilohertz. And I have many devices to measure magnetic field and electric field. This is a first one here. This is another one here, which permits to measure microwaves. And another set here, which